Hi, I'm Andy Brown with Mirror Stage, and I'm here with Rob Koon. He's the playwright of Odin's Horse, which is the new Mirror Stage production that will be on stage October 24th through November 11th. And Rob, last time you were on with Mirror Stage, you talked about your process and what your inspiration was for the play. And I kind of want to dig a little deeper and talk about a couple different things. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is, this play deals with kind of a hot button political issue, the environment. And you manage, I read the play yesterday.
How does it end?
You'll have to tell us. Or not. We'll leave it.
I don't know what happens.
And you managed to actually walk that line of not tipping over into it being a polemic and it's still being entertaining, and you wove the titular myth into the play. How difficult of a process was that? I mean, how much was that on your mind when you set off to write this?
It really was on my mind, because I think that we deal with intractable issues when we're dealing with the environment. Just by virtue of living in the United States, if we were to bring the rest of the world up to our standard of living, it would take 5 planets to support it. And as environmentally conscious as we want to be, or as green as we want to be, we're still using resources at this incredible level. So it is a bit of an intractable problem. And there's a reason things get to be intractable problems, because there's value to be found on both sides of the argument. And I was really kind of struck with the idea of somebody who's having to try to navigate this sort of an intractable problem. Is that, okay, I see this, how do I make sense? How do I make it all make sense? And figure out where I come down on the issue. So that was what was always kind of in my mind when I was writing.
Right. Did you find yourself in the process of writing it, maybe kind of backtracking, going, oh God, now I'm a little bit, I'm falling more on one side than the other? Or?
Not really. What I actually had to find a place for myself is to find the place where I inhabit the play, where I actually get to have a point of view, because you're dealing so much time, well, this person's got a point, and this person's got a point, and this person's got a point. Well, where do I come down? And to find the place where I come down without making it a polemic or an advocacy piece telling people what they should be thinking rather than what they should be thinking about.
Right. And, it's funny because that leads me to a question I was actually going to ask later on, and I'm just going to skip it to the front, is the main character, Armin. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah, Armin.
Yes. Is he intended, the way I read it is he's kind of intended to be a guide for the audience, and probably for you in the process of writing it. And he's the only character in the play that breaks that fourth wall and addresses the audience. Can you tell me, do you see it the same way? Was he kind of your guide through this process and kind of coming to conclusions?
In a lot of ways. I mean, all the characters for all of our plays are autobiographical to some extent. But yeah, in terms of process, very much so. Because, well, you start to do all of the research. You're trying to organize all of the data and all the experience, and just trying to come up with that sort of narrative that kind of gives it all meaning. And I think actually this is something that Armin is still struggling with all the way through the play. He never has that, well, this is what I'm doing. Or, I'm going to the barricades for this point. But if I do, then what am I doing to these people? If I do this, what am I doing to these people?
Right. And that's what I thought was really unique about the play, and kind of avoided that advocacy that you mentioned, is that you kind of realistically included, he's not a man without responsibilities or difficulties. Like he just can't easily jump into one thing or another. And I think now, talk about the myth that you bring up, the Odin myth, and how that relates to the main character.
That actually, that came in, I started working on the play and was doing my initial research, and I found the Odin myth, which is one of the light bulb moments that kind of came on in the play. because we think about Odin, we think of little Wotan and the ring cycle and all of the thunderbolts and all of that. But you also realize that he was the god of poetry, and he was the one who, in Nordic mythology, discovered written language. And so all the things, those little tiny little bits of markings that start to make a story, put them all together, and they all carry meaning. And the things that you have to sacrifice to be able to create meaning in your life. The play's really, it's about what do you want, what will you sacrifice for the thing that you want.
Right. It also kind of implies, too, that language and writing is a kind of magic, too. And that Armin and Odin in the myth are trying to use language and symbols to understand the world better. So maybe talk about the myth a little bit, how Odin relates to trees and the myth specifically that.
Well, in the Nordic mythology, there's a one tree that holds all of the universe together. Its roots in the underworld and its branches in the heavens, and it binds everything together. Odin hung himself from this tree, impaled on his own spear, so that he could discover this power that is in written language. And then we talk about magic, I think it's just talking about an instrument of power and how words have power and how language has power, because it focuses our beliefs, it focuses our intentions, it focuses our emotion, and it's the way that we can start to deal with the large issues of the world rather than just being overwhelmed by them. It puts them into our hands in a way. And Armin is dealing with all of these small little bits of a story. He's trying to look for a matrix that these things will all fit into, so that it has meaning, that he is able to get his hands around it. And whether or not he succeeds in it is something that I think is left for the audience too. The question is always there. It's one of the things that appeals to me about Armin as a character, is because he's a questioning character. There are a lot of people in the play who are very, very certain of what is right and what is wrong. And he's somebody who's asking what is right and what is wrong. And I think that that's what puts him really in our place, and helps us to understand our own process going through. And anytime, I think in the theater, the audience sees themselves on stage, then the story becomes about them, not about all these people over here in this other place doing this other thing. It becomes about them in some way. I think they start to relate to the play a little better. They invest in it a little bit more. It becomes their story. And it's a better experience for everybody in the house that night, too.
Now, do you think, one of the things I found striking about the Odin myth is that it's an incredibly painful process he goes through, hanging by a spear from the tree, to gain this knowledge. And I translated that into Armin's. It's not an easy process that he goes through. Do you feel like that when you write?
Absolutely. It's just something I always tell my students is, if it were easy, everybody would do it. Yeah, of course, it's always frustrating, and it does cost you. It costs you time. It costs you. One of the things it costs you is it removes you from people, because sometimes you have to step back to be able to observe and to be able to consider and start to develop a different sort of perspective. There are a lot of things that it does sort of cost you, and I think that really anything that's worthwhile is going to demand something of you that way, and it comes right back to this is where it's everybody's story. Everybody has a thing that they want, and everybody has a thing they would be willing to give up or willing to go through. When somebody wants to train for the marathon, they're going to put in all that time on the road, and somebody wants it comes down even to saving money. I want this sort of car. Well, I'm going to have to save this amount of money to do it. It's all that sort of trade, that sort of transaction, that's a way that we get through the world.
In some ways, wouldn't you say that all the other characters have made their decision about what they're willing to sacrifice, and Armin has not yet? So what? The other characters in the play too, I've noticed they're more than they're three-dimensional. they're not just a villain, you know, the guy who wants to tear down the forest. He has a specific. How hard was that to get into that mindset? Because that's not a very popular.
No, I
mindset.
actually found the basis for that the character of Seaver in an article in the New Yorker. I wrote this play in 2004, so this is 2003, and it was about a guy who made it kind of a mission to go and kill these landmark trees because he thought that, you know, when you anthropomorphize nature, whether it be an animal or a rock or a tree, what you're doing is you're destroying any sort of understanding of how the world works. And he regarded it as a mission.
Yeah.
And when you start to try to put yourself into that frame of mind, oh, okay, well, of course, you know, there's always this tendency to anthropomorphize things, but then the only thing that you can understand are people who are like you, or things that are like you. You know, everything's got to come through my point of view, and I can never put myself in someone else's. Well, that's a little skewed.
Yeah.
So there's always that place where it connects right back to who I am, even when it's unattractive, even when it's not popular. There's something in it that's very basic, very human, and he's just expressing it in a way that, you know, people sometimes have a lot of
Yeah, and
problems
I want to save that for people in the play because I
people
think,
have some problems with it.
Yeah, and that's a strong part of the play where this particular character, who's one of the loggers, how he defines himself, and it's probably something people haven't heard. The other thing that struck me when I read this play is I really loved the stage direction. It really made me want to see how this plays out on a stage. And so talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about it, because you have kind of a unique way of
I think mostly
doing the stage direction.
In stage direction, so I was trying to focus on things that it feels like this. It feels like this. It feels like this. This is, and what I'm wanting to do is spur the imagination of the designers who are working on the show. There's some long descriptions at the beginning, and they're not written so that the designer does exactly what I want them to do.
Right.
And you never think that that's going to happen. But what you want to do is spark their imagination. Oh, I can do this way. I can do this way. And I can do this way. Find ways for them to make their jump into the play through the physical production, rather than having to, the actors make their jump through the emotional understanding, and the designers make their jump through the physical production. And I want to give them that sort of the same experience too.
I liked how, with the stage direction, all the characters get to, get to stay on stage and be immediately available for Armin to have as devil's advocates or confront. So even though they may be separated within the world of the play, they may be separated by miles. He can have someone can make a point here, and then he can turn to the other character and have them make their point over here.
Because I mean that's the way our memories work.
Yeah.
You know, we have these incredible random access machines in our head. So it's like you don't have to go through a process to remember what somebody said. You don't have to go through a process to start to engage with this point of view because it's right there for you. And I've referred to this play several times as this is what happens in the mind of a man waiting for a document to print.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the memories are just a way to be more vivid.
Yeah.
For me.
In the process of putting together this play, in the last chat you had with Mirror Stage, you mentioned you had a stack of material, almost like this. How long did the process take? I think you mentioned it in your last conversation, but
it's a number of years that it took to actually write the play.
And can you talk a little bit about what kind of research you did? And
well, what generally happens with me sometimes is I get this idea, oh, I want to write about this, and I stard to think about, well, what do I need to know to write this? And I realize I don't know what I need to know to write it, so I have to go find out. And it wound up doing a lot of research about forestry, research about archaeology, research about not archaeology, that's another play, the arborists, and the economy of these areas. The problem with that is when you're just writing the research, it's very easy to write a paper and to write a play.
Right.
To find the place where where it became my story, to find those places where it sort of grounded out with me emotionally was the real transformative part of that, and the thing that started to make the play start to come together. It's about this character who's a questioning character in the middle of people who are very, very certain. Which I just find, especially these days, I find myself in that position. I mean, there's somebody so certain over here, somebody so certain over here, and I'm in the middle, and I have to navigate for myself.
Yeah. How did you click into the character was supposed to have spent some of his childhood in Iceland?
That was through the Odin myth.
Yeah.
There's got to be some organic way to start to make the story appear.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just kind of applied on the top, and it's just it's
Right.
like a poster. So, oh look, there's a poster.
October 24th to November 11th.
So I was thinking, how would this start to? How would he have encountered this?
Right.
I'm from an Air Force family, so I've been moved around. I moved around a lot when I was young, and
So you have that.
Yeah.
You have that in common with the main character.
Mm-hmm. And so, sure, I know these kids who their dad married a local girl,
Right.
and then they started moving around, and I think that this is a way that this thing starts to ground out with my experience, and I can understand the character emotionally, and not just the data that happens to it, because data's boring.
Right. Right.
The sort of emotional challenges that we all go through, those are the things that are interesting.
So, and talk a little bit about the language. What kind of research did you do into the Icelandic language?
I went to Iceland.
You went to Iceland?
I went to Iceland.
Had you ever been there
I had
before,
never
or?
been there before. I just got to the point where I needed to know, I could do the research about what it was like and what people did, but I needed to be able to go and walk around on the street and to get that sort of feeling from it. So I did go there, done a little bit of research, in the Icelandic language, and so that which leads you to the sagas and things like the Havamal, which is quoted in here. They have a wonderful museum for that in Reykjavik. And the interesting thing about the Icelandic language is it's basically still the language of the Vikings. It's still,
Yes.
they can pick up one of the sagas 900 years old and read it.
Right.
We couldn't do that with Chaucer.
No. Or it wouldn't make sense to most
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
So that was very interesting to look at that culture, but not to look at it as like, I'm going to write this character who's Icelandic and it's part of that culture, but to write the character who's alien and doesn't belong there.
Right.
And he winds up in another place where he doesn't belong.
Yeah.
And emotionally, he's kind of in a place where he's not sure where he belongs. He's just had some success, and he doesn't know how to handle success. Was it just fate? Was it something I could do? It's a foreign place for him.
Right.
And when you come to a foreign place, how do you start to find your way around?
Right. So, that's something that just occurred to me. So that's kind of a juxtaposition between the new place, the foreign aspect that he had when he was a kid in Iceland, and his newfound success. And that's something we should talk about with the main character too, because when we enter the play, he has just had his most successful turn as a writer, and this world is kind of new to him. He's in some ways he's not as free, and in some ways he doesn't know the language of it. That's where he talks to the Lopat, the guy who runs the timber company, is almost like, you're new to this world, you're new to success. So that's why he returns to that memory in his childhood. Or, I hope I got that right. Does that sound correct?
Why don't you come see the play? Yeah.
Now, how about some of the, so you went to Iceland. Did you hang out with some of these environmentalists that are...
I eventually did do that,
Yeah.
but I had already written the play.
Right.
The play won the National Award for Ecodrama in 2004, and it was actually presented at Humboldt State University in Arcata, California. And this is where most of the play is set, is in that area of California, Arcata, Scotia, those areas in Northern California. So when I was there, I really did have the chance to meet some of the tree sitters. There had just been this huge extraction. They'd gone through and cleaned out a bunch of them. Wow. The night, one of the nights of the festival, this happened, and got to meet and talk to some of them after that.
How did that compare to the character that you created in the tree sitter?
You know, they say the average tree sitter, if they do just an average tree sitter, she's a 22-year-old young woman who's had a family tragedy.
Interesting.
And so the character of the tree sitter is not a 22-year-old woman.
Right.
This is somebody who is reacting to a tragic event they've had in their past,
Right.
And has gone to the forest to heal.
Yeah.
And this is something that's really, really common. And I was a little concerned going out there because I knew that she wasn't part of it. She wasn't the template of the character that these people were all going to know. And I figured, you know, if somebody thinks she's not authentic, I am going to hear about it.
Right.
And everybody responded to her really very well.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
I felt like I had gotten through that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's part of the play as well, is that as we lose these forests, we lose that connection to something that is really important, and you know, that's why you bring in the myth, I think, is to kind of point out that all these cultures, in fact, I think the one character mentions that all these cultures have kind of a forest myth or a tree myth.
Even desert cultures, you go back and you find these desert cultures, they have myths of forest, which is really kind of fascinating.
Yeah. Now, how about the other side of the coin? Did you talk to any people who were in the forest, the lumber industry?
I've done that as well. We went to the Time Pacific lumber that's since been sold to a different company. They had a company town called Scotia, and you'd walk in and they'd see this posted on these walls, code of conduct for the town of Scotia. You either had, you know, employees or guests, and there was just nobody was a citizen. It was all planned. It was an old company town. To go around there and see that, yeah, it lives in this little valley. It was dominated by this huge mill. There were little houses. The kids would go to school in the company school. They would shop at the company store, and the entire world of these people was this company. And they call that part of California the Lost Coast. And economy up there is some tourism, and the rest of it is this. And that's what, you know, that was a voice that I needed to have in the play, is that people think, well, yeah, you talk about these great big issues. I have to feed my family.
Right.
I have to buy shoes for the kids. How do I live if I don't do this?
How does somebody, when you were talking to those people, how does somebody respond to you? I mean, that's got to be a difficult pitch.
Well,
to make.
I mean, most of it's just informal conversation. There's an expectation at a certain point that you're going to turn on them.
Yeah.
That you're going to make them into the bad guy.
Right.
You just have to be willing to listen.
Right.
You know, tell me why you're doing this. Tell me why you. And you know, there are people who were very militant, adamant, anti-tree sitters. There's some people who were not. Yeah. And it surprised me. And it surprised me to find out about that there's this sort of almost a camaraderie. And that's not exactly the word I would want to use, but there's a relationship that happens between those people because they're all out there and they all are doing something that's very dangerous, and and they know each other. And sometimes, you know, you know that someday you're probably going to have to go up that tree and get somebody. Right. And that's kind of
is that really a job, that there's somebody that has to kind of extract these people?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a rough job.
Yeah, I would not want to do it.
No.
Well, when you look at I have something I brought in for rehearsal. It's a full-length photograph from National Geographic about one of the redwoods, and you see exactly how big they are. Yeah. And we talk about Astor in the tree, 180 feet up the tree, 18 stories up in a tree that goes up over 200. These trees will go 300 feet tall. Wow. And it's a 30-story building. Wow. It's a 30-story building on a 20-foot foundation. And people look very, very tiny.
Yeah. So, in just winding it up and kind of going back to the stack of research that you did, what was the most surprising thing? Because I imagine you go into these things kind of having a preconception, and then it changes you and it changes your ideas.
The thing that was actually the surprise was to hear about the there were actually moments of relationship. I mean, it was tremendously adversarial. There were people who were killed. There are people who died. Yeah. And that really does tend to harden points of view. There was the famous court case of the activists who were doing the sit-in. They got pepper spray swabbed into their eyes. It was very, very ugly. And that's what I expected. I expected it to be like this war zone between these people. But to find that there were instances that it was not like that. To find times that when the extractors would go up in the tree, and there's a point where they say, okay, we both have to get out of here alive.
Right.
Okay. And to find those moments, it was really moving to me, and that was one of the real hopeful moments for me, is that sometimes there are these, I don't agree with this person, they don't deserve to have bad things happen to them because I don't agree with them. And I think that's, this day and age, a powerful thing to say.
Yes. Well, wow, it was great talking to you, Rob.
Good to talk to you, Andy.
And I can't wait to see it on stage.
I can't wait either. It's going to be fun.
I'm just going to repeat one more time, just so it's Odin's Horse, and it's going to be on stage October 24th through November 11th, and I look forward to it.
Thanks a lot.
Great,
We'll
thanks.